Welcome back to The Hope Show. Thank you for tuning in again. If you like our content, don't forget that in the description, we have an email where you can send us, your comments, questions, or, any ideas for future topics that we can talk about. And don't forget to like and subscribe as well. So today, we're going to continue our conversation about reinforcement and punishment. But I'll introduce, we have some new people. I'm Julie, and this is also Julie.
Hey, everyone.
Danielle.
Hello.
And Allison.
Hi. And
we're going to be talking about punishment. And that the premise and the foundation of ABA, where reinforcement and punishment, is really how we utilize that principle in our intervention with ASD. But it is probably, I would say, the most misunderstood, really theories, if you want to call it that, practices in terms of what we do in the field and what it really, really is versus what, I guess layman's terms you could say, and what the world says is punishment, discipline, things like that, parenting type things, is actually pretty common, misunderstood, and misused. And so we're going to define that a little bit more and really talk about, again, the hard things, the controversial things within the field that affect, really affect the field and affect how people view what we're doing. So as we kind of talk about that, I wanted to bring up something I saw. It was about 6 years ago. I'm not actually sure. 6 to 8 years ago, there was a study that came out, and it kind of went all over the internet. And the study was about aversive punishment procedures and the effect. What they had found is it was affecting the gray matter of the brain and actually damaging and having long-term damage, and that wasn't repairable. And I remember this going around all the forums and Facebook groups and things like that. And a lot of ABA providers were really, really upset when this article came out, and rightfully so. But it was this, we can't have stuff like this out there because it's going to hurt the field. And every time I would, not always comment, but some of the comments that I made was to truly help understanding evidence-based practice as clinicians and our responsibility, our duty, whether we're licensed or just certified or that kind of thing. We have an ethical responsibility to look at what the research is saying. We're required to do that as clinicians. Right. And even if the research is hard, even if the research goes against everything that we've been doing in the past, we still have to look at it and say, wait a minute. How do we, with this new information, how do we adjust what we're doing? What are the clinical implications for this information? So instead of just being upset that this information has been out there, it's been replicated, how can we do better? And what are we doing wrong? And how can we do better? And sometimes we have to face those hard things that maybe what we have been doing in the past is potentially harmful, potentially damaging, as opposed to just like, I'm not going to look at it. That's not true. And so it is hard for us to face those things. But I think that, today I'm hoping with this episode that we can shed some light on punishment and some practices and what we can do better as clinicians, as ABA providers to whether that means stop doing those things or making sure that that's not done anymore, so that we can keep our field strong and healthy, I guess. Really.
Yeah, I think when you had kind of discussed this article, I just kind of went back to the Cooper book and like, what did they say about punishment and all? And I found this quote, and I'm just going to read it because I don't think any of us could say it better. So just in the Cooper book, they say, although many of the inappropriate and ineffective applications of punishment are the result of misunderstanding or misapplications, no doubt reflect our incomplete knowledge of the principle as a result of inadequate basic and applied research. So it's kind of what you're saying.
Yes,
exactly.
Right. And so I think that we need to really understand. So one of the big things is for us to best understand as providers using ABA using punishment and reinforcement theories is to truly understand it. So I don't know, Julie, would you like to define punishment?
Sure. I think looking at it, Danielle, in the last episode, you defined reinforcement, and the definition of punishment is not very different. It is the addition or removal of a stimuli after a behavior that reduces the future likelihood of that behavior occurring. So again, it can be positive or negative with the idea that we're adding something or taking something away, but the goal is that it has to reduce the future likelihood of the behavior. Mm-hmm. And that's the key that we miss out on a lot. Like, what was the effect of the behavior? And if we're not actually reducing the behavior, it's not punishment. It's not a punishment procedure. Mm-hmm. But the term punishment is thrown out at it.
Even if it looks like it.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that's kind of the thing. And hopefully if we can give some examples today to better help, the world out there to be able to sort the difference between the things that we hear in like parenting and punishment and discipline versus really here scientifically, this is what is happening or not. Because sometimes we think that we are reinforcing when we're really punishing, and sometimes we're punishing when we're really reinforcing. Is that right?
Yeah.
So let's get started a little bit about punishment and examples.
So I think an idea, like you said, like punishment a lot of times gets mistaken as discipline. Taking discipline out of the table, like the idea of a positive punishment could be eating a piece of fruit that you think is going to be sweet, and you take a bite out of it and it's sour because it's not ripe yet. So I just took a bite out of this peach that I thought was going to be sweet, and it's sour. Well, now tomorrow I'm not going to eat another one of these peaches because that aversive taste was added, that sourness that I didn't like. So now I think the rest of my peaches are going to be sour. I'm not going to eat one. So that, again, has nothing to do with the idea of discipline. It's just the idea that my behavior of eating peaches has reduced.
Yeah.
On the flip side, when we look at the negative reinforcement, we've all been there. Banks, credit cards, everywhere, they'll charge you a late fee, right?
Okay.
So they're adding that fee of you having to pay extra money because you were late on a payment.
Taking your money away.
Yes. Thank you.
We're talking
I
about
have to pay more. I'm paying more because my payment was late. So I'm losing more money. Something's being taken away from me. And so now in the future, I'm not going to make that payment late. My behavior of late payment is going to reduce because I don't want to lose more money.
Yeah.
Oh, those are great, like relatable examples too for us to really understand that a little bit more.
Or like overdraft,
Yeah, overdraft
the
fees.
behavior of overdrafting will be reduced if you're charged.
Right.
Maybe.
Maybe.
If it functions as a punisher.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so the same thing that we talked about with reinforcers
Right.
is the same thing applied to punishers?
Yeah. So are we assessing if what we're assuming is a punisher is actually a punisher? Are we looking at if that behavior that we're targeting for decrease is actually decreasing over time? If it's not a punisher.
There's the huge assumption that if you're adding something that you, as the person adding it, think is aversive, that it automatically is punishing. And that is what we're learning with the research or looking at. It is not always the case.
I actually I'm sorry, Julie. I got in an argument with a trainee one time in training class because I said, you could have a client who cusses, okay? So they say the cuss word, and you as the teacher or the RBT says, stop saying that. If the behavior increases or continues, I'm going to tell you not to say stop saying that because you're not reducing that behavior. And the trainee was like, then if you're not telling these kids to stop cussing, what are you teaching these kids? And I was like, again, I'm not saying that I don't want the behavior to decrease. I'm saying that if you tell the kid or the person, the adult, stop cussing and it doesn't stop, then that's not effective. So I think I did want to bring that up because it, again, if it's not effective, we shouldn't do it.
Right.
Yeah.
So thinking about the misunderstanding, kind of layman's, I think about nagging. Okay, so nagging your spouse to take out the trash or something like that. So a lot of times we think that nagging for them to take out the trash is like punishing in a way. So what exactly would be, so the understanding that if it's not decreasing what behavior
Yeah.
decreasing, because I don't want him to decrease taking out the trash.
Yeah, so then you would just be looking at what behavior are you trying to decrease? Are you trying to decrease playing games instead of taking out the trash? Then and if he does stop taking out the trash, or I'm sorry,
I know. See?
if he stops playing the games and then takes out the trash, then
The
your
nagging
punishment worked. Your nagging worked. But if it didn't, if he continued, if he's like, I don't want to hear it, I don't care, I'm just going to put my headphones back on, I'm going to keep playing the video game or do whatever he or she does, then the nagging didn't work.
Well, and I think in your example there, again, you also have to look at the order in which these things are occurring.
Yes.
That stimuli that we're saying as a punisher has to happen after the behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're talking about taking out the trash and you're nagging him after the fact, it's like, I want to increase that behavior.
Right.
But if I want to reduce the playing games and so that you will take out the trash, you have to be careful what you're saying is the punisher because of when it's occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And really look at what behavior you're trying to increase and what behavior you're trying to decrease.
So if he comes in from taking out the trash, I'm like, oh, you finally did it. Now, now what about the bathroom? Or something like that. Then
He's probably not going to do it again. Or she. Yeah.
Great. Okay, so thinking when we go to, nagging, which some would be, that's extremely aversive, thing. But so thinking about, adverse punishment, and that's kind of, in the field, the thing that we're trying to reform, to help bring a better understanding. And so I guess what, can we talk about the difference between how punishment is used in a really effective, humane, respecting their dignity, respecting the client, versus something that, doesn't respect their dignity as a human being.
Right. Like when you think about some of those ideas of protecting someone's dignity when using a punishment procedure, most of them, in all honesty, that I've used in practice don't. It almost exploits the client and exposes like their failure or their dignity. One of the big examples I know I've used in the past is I had a client that we used a contingent exercise program with. And so that was like, we wanted this client to stop disruptive behavior in the classroom. And so anytime that would happen, this client would get marched out of the classroom to the fitness room and have to engage in contingent exercise. And so what am I doing to that client? They're being called out in front of their peers. They're being marched down a hallway, and then they're given this aversive task to do. And what are all these people saying along that way?
Right.
It's like peers would ask, where are you going? Oh, peers would say, oh, he got in trouble again. And so it's like this client is being called out. So what harm is that doing?
Yes.
I would say, I think similarly.
Also, I was just going to say really quickly on that. Also, what are we doing to the thought of exercise?
Right.
That's supposed to be a healthy
Right.
thing, a healthy behavior.
Oh, there's so many things on that.
That's extremely sad.
And that's an outlined form of punishment.
Yeah.
So what is your, so you're new to the show. So what is your, you're kind of talking about past things. So what are the things that you're seeing us do at the Hope Source in a different way that kind of, what you...
That's refreshing?
Like? Yes, I guess.
think it's really refreshing to look at the idea of, instead of like focusing on like, we have to make this challenging behavior stop.
Yeah,
we have to do something to make this maladaptive behavior stop. Looking at why is this maladaptive behavior occurring and what skill deficits are the root of that. And really focusing on that skill acquisition that helps reduce that behavior without even targeting it.
Yes.
It's like the natural reduction of challenging behaviors because they're gaining the appropriate skills.
Yes.
And I think that has been just really nice to see and really nice to be able to put in practice.
That's been huge for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause same thing, all kinds of like behavior plans I had to put in place for clients just because, they were engaging in these maladaptive behaviors and it was on their treatment plan. Okay. We got to throw in a BIP, but what if it's a behavior like self-stim, does there need to be a behavior plan for that?
No.
Right.
And I think that is one of the biggest things I see on the
Yes.
internet, honestly, from the adult autistic community. They're saying quit blocking stems. And we're not going to go into that for this episode because that's a whole separate thing on that. But it really, really understanding, we have to listen to them and understand why that may not be, respectful, or dignifying for them. So understanding that a little bit more, but yes.
Yeah. And
that's a big one.
I don't know. There's something, it just doesn't always feel nice to put in a behavior plan to decrease it. Like, it's not kind, why is that important? There are other things that we can work on acquiring skills so that they don't have to engage in those maladaptive behaviors, like Julie was saying. And that is just, it takes a lot of pressure off us. I think it takes a lot of pressure off of the kids too. We're not focusing on the
things they're doing wrong, or the things they think are being perceived as wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think yesterday in our clinical meeting, when we talked a lot about guiding and adult-child relationship and child development, we touched on the fact that some of these behaviors that we're calling maladaptive are actually developmentally appropriate until the age of 10.
Right.
Because they don't have the skill that they need to be able to sit for more than 5 minutes to, I don't know, give me some more.
Yeah. Well, we talk about like self-regulation, executive functioning, which is so much later, which starts to emerge at, we're closer to 8 at this point, but we're asking not even just individuals with autism, we're asking 5-year-olds in kindergarten to sit, to self-regulate, to calm down, to be able to cope with their parent not present, things like that, when developmentally that actually isn't even appropriate for the 5-year-old to be able to do that. You see them over the course of kindergarten and they get, a little bit better at being able to manage that, but they're a whole year older. But I think about, those types of things and looking at what needs to come first. And like what Julie's saying, that skill acquisition, and that's what we see at the Hope Star. So when we see those skills and being able to co-regulate, which leads you to be able to self-regulate, later, I got to be able to communicate and work and develop those coping skills to be able to calm myself down. But until I can calm myself down, until it's developmentally appropriate to calm myself down, I need your help. And so when we have those practices where we keep placing the demand and we keep doing those,
behavior momentum,
things like that we aren't taking into account that developmental, where they are at that place. Can they even self-regulate? Is it even appropriate, at that point? So I think it's just kind of that when, because we do use punishment, and we do that, but we reserve it for very specific things like safety and dignity.
Yes.
And the protection of the client at all costs. But I think that's also that's a scary thing to say because of the negative connotation of the word punishment and punishment in ABA. Yeah. So I don't know if you guys want to give some examples of how we use punishment for safety and dignity, that can be, maybe better reflective of what it truly should look like.
I think it's important too to distinguish that we're implementing some procedures, honestly, that we hope will be punishing for the clients in these specific set of safety circumstances. So if I have a client who elopes, if they get out of the building and are running towards the street, I'm going to tell them stop.
Really loud and really
loud, very firm. Gonna pull out that very firm tone, the mom voice, as some people say. I want that stimulus added of me saying stop in that firm mom voice to stop that behavior and decrease it in the future, because I can't have them running out into the road.
Right. Yeah. But you're not saying stop for things that don't involve safety and dignity. Yes, we don't need to have that. Stop doing that because you're wiggling in your chair.
Right. But also, we're not, again, even if that is the case, we're still not targeting that behavior for decrease per se. We're not creating situations just so that behavior will happen, just so we can implement the BIP. We're still working so hard on those skills, to the skill acquisition, to really help them.
Eliminate the need.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
we if we
Thank you.
work on if you work on self-regulation, then there is no need for the impulse control,
Right.
or the lack of impulse control. Right. There is
Yes.
need for impulse control, but the ability to stop yourself, the ability
Right.
to check yourself, but way even before you get out of the building, the ability to cope with change, the
Yes.
flexible thinking, being able to say how I feel. Being able to communicate all of that to say, I don't want to do this. I'm afraid of this. This is too scary for me. If we build those skills, then I don't even need to run in the first place. And then
Right.
there's
Right.
no need for a punishment to even occur.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think another good key, like when looking at it, I think we've all used, who've been in ABA, some sort of punishment procedure in terms of potty training.
Yeah.
And again, it's gonna depend on that effect on the behavior. So again, when you're bringing in client dignity and you're bringing in, is it going to reduce the future likelihood of the behavior? If a client has an accident while they're working in their workspace and you're marching them back and forth down the hall to the bathroom, and that doesn't reduce them having an accident the next day, you just implemented this entire almost shaming procedure on that client. And what are they going to carry with them
Right.
in the
Yeah.
future past that?
Right.
Even if the plan is effective. So I remember a long time ago when I was, it was even before RBT, when I was a therapist, I saw a client who had a positive punishment procedure in place while they were doing toilet training. And he had an accident. He had to walk back to the spot, from the spot he had the accident to the toilet. I forget exactly what the procedure looked like. But he never had an accident again after that. It took one time and he was toilet trained. So was the procedure effective? Absolutely.
It works.
But was that
At what cost?
Yeah.
Exactly.
At what
Yeah.
cost? And did he happily do it?
No, he was crying the whole time.
And
That was the saddest I ever saw that kid.
yes. And I think that's like, yeah, at what cost and where is the trust eroded, the dignity eroded, I would think of just the self-confidence.
Yeah. How is that going to increase their uncertainty for things in the future?
Right.
What's going to happen if I do this wrong?
Yes. Well, and another piece to that is, I mean, I think a lot of people might say, right, but then where's the dignity when he, pees his pants in the future?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean we don't need to put a potty training program in place. It's just the way that you do it can cause trauma, can take away their dignity. So in that case, you may be implementing this procedure, but it could manifest in a different way. They could come up with a different, alternative behavior to control other situations. So really, are we effective at all?
Right.
Yeah, it affected
If
that
it-
behavior, but something else
If I
happened.
have anxiety about the future, if I have anxiety about, okay, I don't want this to ever happen again. So it worked, but now I'm anxious about it. So now I'm, pulling at my hair, pulling at my, whatever it may
Yeah.
be. Now I have some sort of, anxious behavior instead,
Yeah.
which is even harder,
Yeah.
to be able to,
Right.
reduce, especially when it's self-injury, and that kind of thing. So we think about the implications, of that, and we'll talk about that a lot in our mental health episode, about trauma and the effect on anxiety and things like that. But yeah, I think we have to always think, and I challenge, clinicians to be thinking about, but at what cost? This will work. This will look good. Yes, I can tell the family I got this to stop.
Right.
But we have to ask at what cost. So
Well, and when looking at the cost of it and saying it does work, there are other certain characteristics that need to be met for it to work. The punisher has to be present or available. And I know Danielle has a great example of this.
I give this example all the time, but it's true. We all speed, but we only. Okay, let me rewind because I'm laughing because this is kind of a joke, but it's not a joke. Okay.
It makes sense.
So we all speed, right?
yes.
Sure.
Okay. At least 10 miles per hour over the speed limit, at least.
Times.
But
Three.
guess what happens in the presence of a policeman or cop, whatever you want to call it, okay? We slow down, right? We don't go the speed limit when the cop isn't present, ever. Probably any of us.
some people do. Some people
Probably
go
some
under.
people do, but
Some people do,
I
but
don't wanna
majority
say
of
what I
people.
do.
Right. So technically, we would need a reinforcement plan with the punishment plan.
Right.
And I think there are some insurance companies where you like plug a thing in, and if you go the speed limit,
yeah.
you get
It-
like your payment
Right.
reduced or something. But anyway, that's my
Yeah.
example that punishment does not work.
Yeah, because if you don't see the cops sitting up there at like the turnabout on the highway, my behavior of speeding is not decreased. Like I'm
Yeah.
going to keep speeding.
Or maybe if theoretically you got
Of course,
pulled
theoretically.
over. Yes, thank you for emphasizing that. If you got pulled over in a specific location, maybe in the future you're going to slow down when you come up to that location.
100%.
But the longer theoretic person goes without getting pulled over again or seeing a cop in that location,
That
how long is
behav-
it going to take before that behavior speeding
Right.
comes back up?
Right.
Yeah.
Or like in
Right.
parenting,
Yeah.
you know, you may have a parent who is specifically like more punishing, and in the presence of that one parent, you may behave really well. But then when that parent isn't there, you might be doing things that
Exactly.
mom was like, you know, told you your whole life you never should do.
Exactly. Well, and the same idea with that too is like it goes along with not only does the punisher have to be present, but in most cases, the punishment has to increase in intensity over time to maintain its effectiveness.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So I know an example from my childhood is I talked back. Like I will admit it, I talked back all the time. And, you know, our family did the whole, I'm going to put soap in your mouth. Because, you know, that's what you did in the 80s and 90s, right?
Right.
Well, my mom would get the bar of soap. And after a while, I was like, I don't mind it. And so what happened? Next time, it was the liquid soap. It's like we had to go to something even more intense because it's like that was no longer effective. Okay, let me take it a step up. Well, now you're not going to like the Dawn dish soap in your mouth so much, are you?
Yeah.
So it's like it had to increase in intensity because it just wore off. And that's with the idea of like, does the punishment maintain that lower rate of the behavior or that decreasing of the behavior?
Yeah. And it depends on the temperament of the child too. you know.
Absolutely.
For
But I
me,
think
I would
that-
have been
yeah,
like,
and I think that when you go from things that are, you know, maybe don't start off maybe as aversive, but like at what point is up in the ante? What does that look like?
yeah.
Which can be, you know, very scary.
And I think we kind of alluded to or touched on it a little bit in the last episode, but I think the goal in general in ABA is that we're fading out all of our interventions, right? If we know that we're going to have to increase the intensity of a punisher, or if this behavior is only going to maintain in the presence of punishers, how can we fade out our intervention, or how can we transition it to something that's not going to require as intense of an intervention if we know that that can't sustain over time?
Yeah.
right.
It's just more work on us.
Right.
In the long run, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also the idea of the inappropriate timing of punishments. So again, for punishment to be effective, you have to have the right intensity of it. It has to happen after the behavior. It has to actually reduce the likelihood of the behavior. And you have to make sure you're punishing, and this might go back to your nagging example, the right thing.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at a response cost punishment, so that's like the idea of something being taken away in order to decrease the behavior, and you make your timeline so far in advance, well, if you break curfew during the week, you won't get the car on the weekends. Well, I broke curfew on Monday. And so now I already know I'm not going to get the car on the weekend. What's going to stop me from not breaking curfew Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday nights now?
Right.
And so it's so far removed that once you lose out, it's not reducing the behavior anymore. Like it actually increased my behavior. I'm now going to break curfew for 5 nights this week because, oh well.
Right.
Or it could create, sorry.
No, you
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say, it could create, you know, some anxiety. And like,
It's okay. It's a safe word.
you know, okay, they said, if I do this, this happens, or this is taken away. I may, you know, we've had a client where that was the thing, you know, at the end of the week, the client got something, and he or she the whole week did, you know, amazing. And this plan wasn't put in place by us, by the way. But the whole week, the client did amazing. And then on Friday, getting in the car, that client engaged in the behavior that he wasn't supposed to. And it was like, I'm doing so good. I'm going to be the one in control of if whether or not I get the thing or not, you know. So we see that a lot.
Yeah. So, well, I think, control and thinking about, you know, what that does and trying to avoid punishment, trying to self-sabotage, you know, things, which is basically what that is.
Right.
I'm just going to sabotage myself right in the 11th hour. I'm going to sabotage myself, almost because the anxiety is just too great, you know, and all of that. So I think we think about control, but to me that goes back to, you know, the humanness of all of this and why we have to be so careful and our need. Think about all the things that we do to control our environments, to control, you know, when we feel anxious, when we feel nervous, when we feel like this isn't going my way, this day is just a train wreck. And at every turn, you know, I can't do it, or I feel just incompetent today, or whatever that may be. You know, our need, you know, to do things to kind of control. And I think as we go, you know, deeper into further episodes, you know, about behavior and why certain maladaptive behavior happens, I think it's really important when we have these, you know, punishment procedures, because punishment, you know, in theory, it works. But the challenge and what we're saying is that we have to first think about the dignity, the humanness, the why they're feeling the need to control, why they're feeling the need to have this behavior. And I think that I always hear behavior is communication. We all know behavior is communication. And we can just keep saying it and saying it and saying it. But are we really listening? You know, are we listening? Or are we saying, no, but this is what works? And I think that is what, you know, the adult autistic community is saying. You're not listening. And our need to control comes about feeling out of control, feeling like I don't have a voice and I really don't have, if I don't have those skills to be able to cope, to be able to think flexibly, to be able to read a situation, instead of, you know, punishing that, you know, how do we look at the skills needed to be able to do that? And I think about, you know, the workplace. I think about when our kids graduate, our clients, I say they're not our kids, but our clients, when they graduate and, you know, go off to, you know, jobs and things like that, I think about all the things, the anxieties and the fears and all these things that probably could happen when they already are, you know, so anxious, and that kind of thing, and think of all the things that can be punishing, naturally, you know, but, you know, in those types of environments that, keep them from wanting, you know, to get back up and go to work the next day. I mean, we all suffer, but I'm thinking of specifically those skills needed, and it goes back, you know, to skill acquisition, right? And how the need over time to reduce those so there isn't that need, you know, really to have to resort to that, especially at those extreme, you know, since we only put in plans in place for those extreme things for safety and dignity, but we don't even want to have to do that.
Right.
And so, so
I think one of the key things you said is understanding like the skill level that they're at or they're expected to be at for their development or for their age, depending on what community we're talking about. Because as you were going through that, I just got to the idea of like, do they understand that the behavior they're doing is maladaptive or is wrong? And if they don't understand why it's trying to be like suppressed, is that going to help?
Right.
Or like not even that the behavior is wrong, but that it could have potentially dangerous consequences further down the road. So if you're staring at people frequently, you're staring at all types of people, and you're a giant man, unfortunately, that could be perceived as threatening to people down the road.
Yeah.
Or
talking about inappropriate topics at a school. It's like, and really bringing it out that like, you can't have a casual conversation about the use of a gun while sitting in the school cafeteria, and understanding the negative implications of that, and not understanding in that moment that that's not an appropriate topic.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yes, we need to decrease that behavior right now, but we also need to teach them why,
Right.
you know,
Yes.
like remediate that deficit so that they understand and don't have to get themselves into that situation where punishment has to happen, kind of like you said before.
Yeah, and I think even I think about those scenarios, and I think about our clients who actually will say the rule,
Right.
I'm not supposed to be, but it's that moment of repair, that moment of inhibition, you know, which is those areas that part of the brain that is affected by ASD. But, you know, if I realize, all of a sudden I start talking and I realize, oh no, the rule is we don't talk about this, but I don't know how to shift gears. I don't know how to adjust the strategy. This is the topic right now. I don't know how to adjust to that. How do I fix this? Do I just keep going? Or what happens? Or is there end up being a, you know, kind of a blowout, really, meltdown, you know, in that scenario because I don't know what to do about it. And it could be because someone has said, stop talking about that. And I don't even know how to repair. So I think there's just a lot of implications with working on those things to, you know, yes, I've made them as how do I fix that? And that is, you know, those skills to be able to make those adjustments, think flexibly, cope when you realize you've made a mistake, and you can fix it. Hopefully the school doesn't kick you out. Hopefully the school recognizes that you are trying, and you have no ill intent and that kind of thing. But you know, there are natural consequences, you know, for those things. And so I'm excited that we get to work on all of those skills and need to you know, have to put any type of punishment procedure in place is negated from that. So
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
So we want to challenge everybody to really look at the ethical implications, really understand. And if if you're not in the ABA field, you're not a BCBA, and you're a parent or somebody else who, when you see things like punishment and discipline, even reinforcement, and we hope that you have a better understanding of what that is in the field, but also to challenge, things that have been done in the past or things hopefully still not being done, but those things that we just can do better as a field, to protect the dignity of our clients.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. We'll see you next time.
Bye.